Thanks everyone for accommodating this slightly different presentation, but appreciate the opportunity to join you remotely today. Again, acknowledge that the city clerks and our IT staff have been superb at helping to enable folks who need to work from home, including me, to do so and maintain the isolation that AHS is requesting, even though I can assure you I'm feeling much better today. So just today, Council has decided to renew a state of local emergency. This is valid for another 7 days and can continue to be renewed as needed. Our Emergency Advisory Committee will meet weekly on Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. The public is free to tune in on the live stream. And Council in its capacity there as the committee will be updated on pandemic measures and consider renewal of the state of local emergency for now on a weekly basis. Acting in our capacity as the Emergency Management Committee, today Council felt again that it was necessary to extend the state of local emergency in order to keep Edmontonians safe. This pandemic is an unprecedented situation for our city, and renewing a state of local emergency allows us to manage the situation in the most effective way possible. Now, as you may have heard already, during our meeting, we received an update from Adam on the additional measures the city has been taking since we declared a state of local emergency, such as the Edmonton Expo Centre that has since been set up as a safe space for community members experiencing homelessness, the transit changes that we've made, the playground closures, the closure of the city's in-person services, increased inspections to ensure local compliance with health orders, provincial health orders, and today's decision to close personal service shops, as well as add the Kinsman as an additional overflow shelter space. And Adam will get into all of those and answer any technical questions that you might have in a few minutes here. What I want people to know is that Adam and his team have our City Council's full support on these measures as we all work together to flatten the curve and help prevent the spread of the virus. So I'm doing my part by staying home while I have a cold, and I need others to do the same, as well as staying home and working from home as they can. I don't want to have to take some of the same measures that mayors in Italy have taken, and I'm sure all of you have seen some of those videos circulating, but trust me, I will if I have to. No mayor wants to see their city's death toll rise from something that is preventable, and so we need everyone doing their part. And so just one more thing before I take some questions and we hear from Adam. Even though we're social distancing and not physically together, I want Edmontonians to know that they are not alone. Thousands of Edmontonians are working together to keep our communities safe, and Edmontonians' resiliency will get us through this. And so thank you once again to all of the extraordinary frontline workers, city staff, and others, particularly in healthcare and in retail, who are working tirelessly to combat the effects of this pandemic. We are eternally grateful to each and every single one of you. So happy to take some questions, or maybe would it work better if Adam gives his brief and we do questions together, or do you want me to take questions first?
Take questions first, please, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Sure.
Mayor, so can you, obviously this affects 1,000 brick and mortar businesses, 500 home-based businesses. You know, what do you say to those? A lot of them are home-based small business operators. What do you say to those individuals?
Well, we understand that these measures, all of these measures and all of this disruption have a huge impact on all businesses and organizations, including the City of Edmonton. This particular category of businesses that's being impacted today by these orders is a line of business where physical contact and close contact with customers is the norm, whether it's massage or whether it's body rub or whether it's tattooing or whether it's getting your hair cut. It's impossible to do that from 2 meters away. And we wanted to see whether there could be adequate mitigations and protections put in place, masks, cleaning protocols, other things. But out of an abundance of caution, it's time for these businesses to suspend their operations. And that's really a public health measure, and City Council fully supports Adam's decision to move in this direction based on inspections that they undertook to see practically what's happening in these categories of businesses, and also from feedback that we've certainly been hearing from constituents about a desire to see bold action to limit the spread. And then particular concerns from employees in some of these sectors who are concerned that absent a shutdown of their business, being forced to go to work puts them at risk. And so I think for a variety of evidence-based reasons and concerns we've heard from the public, it's the right step at the right time to really help enforce the distancing measures that Dr. Hinshaw has already ordered at the provincial scale.
I guess just following up on that, does that reinforce your plea to the province for support for property taxes? I know the city has already said there's deferral. The province hasn't committed to providing the city money for that. Does that add to that with these businesses now being forced to close?
Well, I think more and more businesses every day are being impacted by people staying home, which is the right thing for consumers to be doing, is staying at home. They're coming up with creative ways to serve people with delivery-based businesses, curbside pickups, and I salute really the creativity of entrepreneurs in our city and around the world in trying to continue to meet people's daily needs. And stay relevant. However, there's no doubt that I can't think of a business that hasn't been impacted one way or another by all of the public health measures coming into effect. And so one of the relief efforts that we would like to see extended to businesses is further delays or deferrals on utility bills and property taxes. We've taken some steps and the province has also taken some steps. Ideally, we'd like to at least harmonize with what the province is doing on non-residential education property tax for all property taxpayers. But that, again, presents a serious liquidity challenge for the city of Edmonton and all municipalities wanting to provide that kind of relief. So mayors across the country have raised that issue with their premiers. I think premiers are very focused on a variety of issues at the provincial scale. And so frankly, we haven't had the kind of response yet that we will need from provinces in order to extend a greater property tax relief or forgiveness of other fees. And so shortly after this, I'll be jumping on a call with the Deputy Prime Minister and Canada's big city mayors in order to press this issue with the federal government, which has the greatest fiscal capacity and frankly is borrowing at the cheapest rates right now. And Canada's a good bet because of the strong measures that cities and provinces and the federal government are taking. And so I think, many people, including local governments, are going to be looking for relief ultimately from the federal government to backstop our balance sheet and our cash flow, while we in turn pass relief back to businesses that have been affected by this, including today, personal services businesses that for public health reasons need to close.
Mayor Iveson, after the province announced yesterday that municipal peace officers and police have the authority to give out fines starting at $1,000. How is that going to impact Edmonton police? That wasn't really addressed today in the meeting.
I'm going to defer to Adam on the technicalities on that. However, there's still a bit of work to do to extend to peace officers the ability to administer those fines. So there's some technicalities being worked through there that I'm aware of. Adam probably has more current information than me on that, though, so I'll defer to him.
And Mayor, any message for drivers out there who have developed a bit of a lead foot with fewer cars on the road?
Well, I recognize that, or I gather, I haven't been out, but I recognize that the roads are not as busy, and so they feel wide open, and so some people are taking that as a visual cue to drive a little faster. I understand there's also, people have anxiety and want to be out as little as possible and get home to their loved ones, but that's no excuse for breaking the law when it comes to the speed limit. And mainly because the last thing we need is a spike in traffic accidents because people are speeding. And consequently, the kind of drain on our public healthcare system of having pedestrians who are struck, or motorists who strike each other or strike an inanimate object because they lose control because of speed. Speed is still too often a factor in too many accidents in our city, though we've made quite a bit of progress over the years towards Vision Zero. Now's the time where we need everyone to be very, very careful so that they don't wind up either themselves or putting someone else in the hospital at a time where our healthcare workers have enough to deal with.
The city took another step forward today in enforcing social distancing. I assume you don't want to see Edmontonians getting fines and handed tickets each day for violating this. What is your plea to Edmontonians, as the weekend approaches, warmer weather, who are still getting out in the parks and trails?
Well, I think I'm grateful that the province has strengthened the fines that the city can issue for non-compliance and very, very hefty fines for repeated non-compliance. But the City of Edmonton's enforcement approach for the most part is first to ask nicely. And for people who obey the request, the polite request, not just from officials like me, but ultimately people with badges and the authority to enforce these orders and enforce the law in our city, the first step is always to ask nicely. And the fines and the other measures are there for people who refuse to respond. And so it can escalate appropriately until the fine is at a level that it gets people's attention, because we do need compliance. Again, we always look for voluntary compliance. But as measures escalate, we've seen in other parts of the world, things get quite draconian. I really fundamentally believe Edmontonians are getting the message and are going to self-enforce this for the most part. But it's good to have those extra tools and those fines in place in order to send the message if people just aren't getting it, that they need to ideally stay home. And if they're out and about, they need to stay 2 meters away from their fellow Edmontonians for their own health and the health of each other.
Travel that you do and how many people you've come in contact with, do you not think you should have been tested for COVID-19 even if it wasn't recommended?
Well, I did the self-assessment like everybody else, and I think, I would of course like to know, but I think that I understand and hear clearly from Dr. Hinshaw that notwithstanding Alberta is doing some of the most aggressive testing in the world, which is fantastic, the test availability is still limited. And so if there's a firefighter or a senior or an ambulance driver who needs that test more than I do, then so be it. And I'm happy to isolate and take the appropriate precautions, which is a situation most people will find themselves in if they have mild symptoms and don't need to interact with the healthcare system. So it's better for me not to go to a hospital, obviously, or a doctor's office with this. And it's better for me not even to go out to the testing facility if I don't need to. And so again, I defer to AHS's self-assessment tools and the appropriate prioritization of their testing. So, and after 10 days, the science says I should be okay one way or the other. And so we'll hope to see you again in person sometime next week.
What day are you in right now of isolation?
I think 4, I don't know. I should really count. I think I'm about halfway. Sunday would have been day 1.
So Adam's just going to layer a little more detail in for you, and we'll go to questions from Adam right after that. Anything more before we leave you, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I'm just going to listen in, but if there's nothing else for me, thank you very much. I'll mute.
Excellent. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Also like to recognize Kevin Culp and Deanne Andrade. I think I got that name better this time. Oh, not bad. Okay. Thank you for the interpretive services that you're providing. Just wanted to layer in a little bit in terms of what the mayor alluded to. Appreciate council's support for the renewal of the state of local emergency. So that's been extended for another 7 days. In addition to the state of local emergency, there's 3 orders that we're advancing. The first order states that people who have tested positive for COVID-19 or those returning to the country from an international trip must self-isolate. The federal and provincial government have both implemented requirements for people who meet this criteria, and through this order, we can support those individuals to ensure that they're self-isolating at home, or if they don't, if they're not able to, then it would be through the efforts that we've set up at the Expo Center, or any other direction provided by Alberta Health Services or the Chief Medical Officer. The second order relates to physical distancing, and this order requires people to follow physical distancing rules that have been put in place. This means that if you're in a public place, you are 2 meters or 6 feet away from others, and this includes outdoor spaces and parks. And this is not a suggestion, this is a requirement under this order. The third order states that effective immediately, all personal service shops, including tattoo parlors, hair salons, barber shops, nail salons, health spas, tanning salons, and body rub centers will suspend their operations. This does include the home-based businesses and people who come to your home to provide any of these services. These businesses cannot adhere to the physical distancing practices so far. The safety of Edmontonians, they need to be closed to manage the spread of the virus. This will affect approximately 1,000 storefront businesses and 500 home-based businesses. And our folks are going to work with businesses to make this transition as orderly as possible. One item that I just want to highlight to ensure folks are respecting EPCOR. If you see EPCOR crews working in your neighborhood, it's because they're conducting utility system repairs and maintenance to make sure you and your family have reliable power, water, and drainage services to keep our city running. Please stay away from the active work sites. EPCOR and the City of Edmonton, thank you for your patience and support while they complete this work. People are also using more flushable wipes and cleaning wipes and paper towel. Please don't flush those products at home. They shouldn't be flushed. These products are not flushable and can quickly clog a sewer pipe. And at this time, we want to minimize the impact associated with going out and making these repairs, so you could do your part to prevent that. And it will support EPCOR in their efforts to try and minimize unneeded repairs at this point in time. Again, just imploring Edmontonians to take those steps to support our folks at EPCOR. So available to answer any questions.
Some councillors had some questions for you about shopping malls. Why not close shopping malls right now?
So throughout this process, working with our task team and our emergency operations center and the folks that are on this file, we've taken indicators or changes in indicators as the driver for us to make some changes. And in terms of closing malls, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is that if folks are in the mall, to observe the physical distance requirements that AHS and Alberta Health have requested. And so by implementing the second order, which articulates an enforcement of that, we're able to encourage Edmontonians to observe that, and if not, a fine will be levied.
Natasha, you have a question?
Yeah, because the mayor didn't answer the question. I know it's a little bit technical, but I'm just curious, after the province's announcement yesterday that gives the authority to municipal peace officers, police to issue those fines, how much of a strain is that going to be on our police force going forward here?
I'm not sure I can comment on the strain on the police force. I can say that our folks, as part of the team, the COVID task team, the peace officers, EPS, our lawyers have been working closely with EPS lawyers, lawyers in Calgary, to create a consistency in terms of application related to the orders that were advanced by the province yesterday and the orders that we've gone forward with here. In terms of the resourcing constraint, I can't comment. I've said before, minute by minute, hour by hour. And so that's the kind of situation we're in. We're going to continue to monitor it, and through Mr. Aiken and the task team, we'll be able to confirm sort of an ability to provide holistic resource management between our peace officers and EPS based on the application of these orders.
You know, going into the weekend, as Dustin had pointed out, it's going to, you know, the weather's getting better and whatnot. Like, what can people expect in terms of the level of this enforcement?
Well, I think what you're going to see, which is our normal approach, both from an EPS perspective and a peace officer perspective, is you'll see folks encouraging that they're following these orders. And if, I think the mayor said this as well, that if folks aren't following that, then the next step would be a fine and the increase in fines, and still working through the details in terms of that escalation based on the province's announcement yesterday. So I think what you'll see is more folks out there from an enforcement perspective, but I trust that they'll take the steps in a diplomatic, compassionate way, and please follow the advice, and if not, then you'll start to see the fines.
Just quickly or more slowly go through that list of personal shops, and then just with that, when do these stores expect to close? Like, is it as of right now? Is it tomorrow? And how long will this last? Like, does it last 7 days, or is it until your call?
No, they're closed indefinitely. And I will confirm the list here. It's tattoo parlors, hair salons, barber shops, nail salons, health spas, tanning salons, and body rub centers. And this fits under the personal services component of I think the bylaw number is 13138. And in terms of the implementation, so the order is in effect immediately. But our folks are going to be very diplomatic in terms of the implementation of that. Again, you'll see folks going out there and messaging this to those businesses, and just based on the number, 1,500 home businesses, it's going to take some time for us to navigate through that. So we certainly would ask if you're in one of those businesses, and we recognize the challenging times we're in, and sort of really appreciate the challenge this is creating for you, but you can help us, that if you can take your steps on your own to close, that certainly helps our peace officers and our EPS to navigate through that.
Just with that, just for my own clarity, like a massage place, like a legitimate massage place, that they're not covered under this, right?
They're not. I think we encourage our massage centers to follow the same steps, but then there's a physiotherapy lens to this that our understanding is that they're actually going through, like the medical staff, the appropriate PPE and training to ensure that they're doing it from a healthcare perspective. So there is a bit of a delineation, but certainly, as we have all along, if we start to see something that is of concern for us, we may take an additional step. But at this point in time, that isn't in this group of businesses.
Adam, do you have a value on the fines for all three orders?
That's still being confirmed in terms of the application of the fines. And that's the work that I mentioned with in the meeting today, that our lawyers are working closely with the Government of Alberta lawyers and lawyers in other municipalities to just confirm those appropriate applications in terms of fines.
Follow-up. On the physical distancing order, is that a step before the potential closure of parks, trails, River Valley Stairs, and is that on the table?
Something we're certainly monitoring, so I think I would echo the comment that this is the first step, but if we're seeing folks continuing to not observe physical distancing expectations as directed by the provincial government, we may have to take other steps, which includes closure of certain facilities. And we really don't want to close some of our outdoor park spaces, because we recognize that we're getting into a season where people can enjoy the weather. And we also recognize that when it comes to isolation, self-isolation, it can become challenging for individuals to be able to get out and get some exercise. So we really implore Edmontonians to follow this, because we don't want to go to those next steps in terms of more drastic closures. But quite frankly, if we have to, we will.
Last question, Dustin.
Last time we were here, you mentioned price control as a possible order you were looking at. That wasn't mentioned today. What have you seen with that, and is that being looked into still?
It's monitored regularly, so it's one of our 11 indicators that we monitor on a regular basis, and to this point, I don't think we've seen any sort of concerns. I think there is the odd flag, but I wouldn't say it's across the city as a concern, but we're continuing to monitor, and what came up or has come up over the last few days, and it came up in the meeting today, is that we're seeing the desire for folks to donate and provide support during this effort, and we truly appreciate that. It's, again, another example of how great Edmontonians are. And so I think we continue to monitor that, and we continue to appreciate folks that are making donations to support what we're all going through. And we're trying to streamline the method in terms of how we get those donations in and try to channel them to the right locations.
Provide some clarity on the 2-meter distancing. So again, families can still walk together.
Yes, yes. So the order, and maybe I can read it so that it's clear, that while in any public space that remains open in the city of Edmonton, including but not limited to parks, shopping centers, and retail stores, individuals must take all reasonable steps to maintain a distance of at least 2 meters between themselves and any other individual, except individuals they reside with or have close personal relationships with. So, Vinesh, the delineation there is, if you're with your family, it'll be a question we'll ask, is this your family? Is this your relationship? And if it is, then we'll exercise latitude in terms of enforcement.
Is this effective now?
So it's effective immediately. As I mentioned, the implementation is something that we will do over the course of the next hours, and again, from a closure perspective, we're going to be working with the businesses to do that as compassionately and appropriately as possible.